Flyers coverage being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and they'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sports book along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 in order to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Flyers, Islanders, Game 1. Talk about that and what the rest of the Eastern Conference looks like in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Scott Laughlin, SiriusXM NHL Radio, joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. We're excited the Flyers are still in it, unlike the Sixers who can't seem to get out of their own way. But at least one team in Philadelphia seems to have young talent who actually step up to the plate. And, after watching Game 6 on Friday night, Scott, I feel like a lot of Flyer fans, there's a level of relief to see this team finally get to the second round for the first time in 8 years.
Yeah, I think, Josh, it's a big hurdle for them to overcome. And, they beat a real pesky type team in Montreal. I think Montreal is not going to be confused with the 1976 Montreal Canadiens that beat Philadelphia, as we know, in the Stanley Cup final, as the Flyers had their three-peat come to an end. I mean, that group of Canadians was high-flying. They could score. And, with Lafleur and Shutt and guys like that, they could do that. This thing was the furthest thing from the 76 Montreal Canadiens that we'd seen, and yet they still had Carey Price. They had Jay Weber on defense and really played a structured type of defensive type style that I think kept them in the series against a Philadelphia Flyers team that, let's face it, I mean, the Flyers won, but they still feel collectively, I'm sure, that there's another level that they can get to. The thing is, though, Josh, that you wonder about in this series with the Islanders, is it going to be more of the same? Are these going to be, tight-checking defensive-type struggles like we saw against Montreal? I would probably say yes. I mean, that's the way the Islanders play. I think Philadelphia is more than happy to play it that way as well. And, to put it on the backs of Carter Hart and that really good blue line that the Flyers have developed over the years. So I would expect this to be a lengthy, competitive series with the New York Islanders. And I think at least to start the series for sure, that goals for both sides will be at a premium. And if the Flyers could ever get their big guns going, like Konechny and Couturier and Claude Giroux and others like that to chip in, I think Philadelphia will be just fine. And that's one of the reasons why I think I picked them to win this series in 7.
How much do you think the Flyers being outscored in the last series, despite them winning over Montreal, how much of that really came down to Carey Price, and how much of it was their own struggles at times, especially on the power play?
Yeah, I think it was, somewhat Carey Price. I go back to, what was it, Game 2 where they got blanked 5-0. That Flyers team, Josh, that Flyers team was unrecognizable based upon the team that we had seen do so well throughout the regular season and then to at least start in the postseason. That was just an aberration. You just want to kick that one to the curb. Then later in the series, Carter Hart has a hiccup or so. You think he's getting pulled. Well, he's not. All of a sudden, he rebounds the next game as you might expect that he would. So I think that Carey Price always gave Montreal a chance. I think he played as well as he possibly could play at this stage of his career. But I just don't think that Montreal had enough firepower up front to beat a team like Philadelphia. I've got some of the same concerns probably about the New York Islanders, but I got to be honest, Josh. While I say that, Philadelphia needs Konechny and Couturier to get going along with Claude Giroux, the Islanders are probably saying the same thing too. We still haven't seen the best of Matthew Barzal. We still haven't seen Brock Nelson make an appearance here in the postseason based upon what we think he's capable of doing. So I think that both teams have a little bit more to give. Whether or not it comes to the surface here, especially in the early going of this series, remains to be seen. I would expect that it'll be more of the same, like Flyers fans witness against the Montreal Canadiens. It'll be low scoring, it'll be tight checking, and no doubt it'll come down to the third period, probably in the final minutes before it's all decided.
You mentioned some of the guys on the Islanders. Who is a guy that we should keep an eye on in this series who, maybe he's not Barzal, maybe he's not the biggest name on the team, but he's a guy that could really make or break this series?
Well, the one guy that's really stepped up in the postseason for the Islanders has been Anthony Beauvillier. Now, Beauvillier a couple of years ago was a first-round pick, so, he's not coming out of the left field here, but he is the type of guy that, still has maybe not reached his potential. Now he's starting to do that in the postseason, Josh, and ever since day one of training camp, those that cover the New York Islanders have told me that Beauvillier has probably been their best player up front. He's produced big time, as we know. And I think that Beauvillier is a guy with his speed that you've got to be very, very aware of when they're out there on the ice. Anders Lee, the captain, of course, the former high school quarterback in Minnesota, easily could have actually gone on to play football collegiately, decided to go to Notre Dame and play hockey there instead of football. Anders Lee, really in all facets of the game, led the way for the Oilers in that series as well, not only by his offensive exploits, but just being physical. And he had to fight twice after he hit Nick Backstrom, albeit late, in Game 1 of that series with the Washington Capitals. But Anders Lee supplied that leadership and physicality, and then you combine that with the offensive exploits of a guy like Beauvillier. That gave the Oilers just enough to get by their opponent in the last round, and we know what happened to their opponent. They've already gone on to fire their head coach, Todd Reardon. So things not working out well for the Caps. I would think that things would work out better for the Flyers in this series, but the Oilers play a structured, frustrating style of play. Goals will be hard to come by, like I say. Anytime you play a Barry Trotz coach team, you know it's going to be a competitive game. They're a difficult team to play against. You use all the old hockey cliches you want to, but they certainly apply to this New York Islanders club.
Scott Laughlin joining us here on Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN, SiriusXM NHL radio, co-host of the NHL Morning Skate. You can follow him on Twitter at LaughlinSXM. Scott, how much also intrigues you about Carter Hart going from first round to second round? So he got over the one hump. He got over, here's idols on the other side of the ice, dealing with his first playoff round. Now he goes on to the second round. How interested are you in seeing how he handles the next level of the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I'm interested, but I expect he'll be okay. I mean, anytime he hit the hiccup or two that he did against the Montreal Canadiens, he bounced back kind of the way that they expected him to bounce back. And, you know, when he was going to get yanked after that offside goal that was nullified against Montreal, I mean, Alain Vigneault said, hey, look, I looked in his eyes and he looked like he was ready to go. He was ready to continue. And although he was kind of fighting it on that night, he bounced back the way that you expect him to bounce back. And I think they've got full confidence in him that he can get the job done at this level. I mean, you and I have talked about it before, Josh. His resume indicates to us that this stage is not going to be too big for him. He's played at a couple of World Junior Hockey Champions. He's been a guy in the Western Hockey League that has been the top goaltender really in the CHL. So he's supposed to be doing these types of things. He's not a guy that, you know, maybe has to soul search here or there. He's not a fifth-round pick that's coming to left field. I mean, he's been as advertised, I think, for the Philadelphia Flyers here. And this has been, as you say, going up each ladder, a different rung along the way. And I think that this is part of the maturation. I don't want to say trust the process. You know, that's not playing over too well in Philadelphia with the Sixers and such the last couple of years. But this is about the building process for a guy like Carter Hart because he's supposed to do this. But to your point, I mean, each time he wins a round, each time he wins a game at this stage of the season, it means something because this just is something added extra to his resume that already has been stellar so far.
On the other side of the ice, the Islanders have basically had two goaltenders. The big name most people might know about is Semyon Varlamov. But how much of a step down is from Carey Price to the Islanders' goaltending situation?
Well, Varlamov has been the guy that's gone, you know, start to finish for them so far, which is somewhat surprising because they did have some back-to-back situations earlier, and Thomas Greiss has been that 1A, number 2 complement to a guy like Semyon Varlamov. Now, Varlamov is a really good goaltender. Varlamov's a guy who played well with Washington, but they couldn't get over the hump way back when. Then he went out to Colorado, had a couple of good seasons, but kind of got lost in the shuffle there when they went out and got Philip Grubauer. And so Varlamov finds his way to the Islanders. And, you know, there's another guy to bring into this equation, and it's a guy for the Islanders, Josh, that will not play in the NHL until next season. Whenever next season should start, Ilya Sorokin comes over from the Continental Hockey League from Russia. He's supposed to be a stud goaltender, was one of the best goalies in the KHL for the last couple of seasons, and he is at the very least next season expected to share some time in goal with his countryman, Semyon Varlamov. Now, Varlamov is, I think, so far in the postseason, let it be known that, hey, I know Sorokin's coming over. I like the guy the whole bit. I'm still the number one here. I've still got term on my contract as well. Let's not forget about that. So I think this has been Varlamov's opportunity to say, you know what? I know Sorokin's here. I know you're looking forward to having him. He's going to be my teammate. He's going to be my stablemate. But I'm still the guy. I'm still number one. And the way he played in the round robin, in the qualifying round at least, for them, and then, of course, in the first-round series victory, I think indicates that, you know, he's playing some really good hockey. Is he Carey Price? No, I don't think many guys are, if any at all. But Varlamov is doing his part for sure. And it's the same thing that's been part and parcel with the Barry Trotz coach team over the years. First with Nashville, Now with the New York Islanders, you build from the goalie out, whether it's Pecorine and a great blue line core, or in this case, Varlamov and a real sort of good blue line by committee type core. I think the New York Islanders are doing just fine with Varley.
Flyers Islanders coming up, game one at the top of the hour right here on 97.3 ESPN. Scott, let's look at the other series on the other side of the Eastern Conference. Bruins Lightning, two of the heavyweights of the Eastern Conference this year. Bruins got the first game, close game, interesting game. What are your thoughts on this matchup between, like I said, two of the heavyweights in the East?
I think last night was Boston's best performance so far in the postseason, and maybe that will bode well for them down the road here. I think up until that point, we still had questions on occasion about Boston. They were seemingly disinterested in the round robin. Tuukka Rask kind of admitted that, and of course, as we know, Tuukka Rask has opted out, and he's left the bubble in Toronto, and now it's all about Yaroslav Halak, and maybe Daniel Vladar gets an opportunity, if need be, with some back-to-backs coming up. I don't think that would happen, but you never know. He is now the backup goaltender who yesterday got a contract extension with the Bruins himself. But as far as Boston goes, last night was their best game. I think the perfection line, the Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, David Pastrnak line was lights out good last night. The second goal of the game that they scored on the power play, they controlled play for about 90 seconds in Tampa's zone. The Lightning had 4 different opportunities to clear the zone, couldn't get it past Torrey Krug and others, and Boston would take advantage. So I think that Boston played really, really well last night. Tampa Bay, look, John Cooper said afterwards, I don't know what it was, but we had a slow start. I'm not sure why we started the way we did, but we did. Now we've got to be better in game 2, right off the hop, right from the opening face-off onwards. And, the underlying thing here, too, with Tampa Bay, I think, Josh, is the fact that Steven Stamkos is still not with the team. Steven Stamkos still has not played in the postseason, and when we went through all this pandemic and all the time off, we felt like, okay, at the very least, well, that gives Stamkos more than enough time to get back, to get healthy, to make his mark in the postseason for Tampa Bay whenever the postseason would start. And then we started to hear speculation that maybe in some of the rehab that he had a bit of a setback and that sort of thing. You'd have to think that that's what it's got to be, because as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, he was earmarked to start and to play in the postseason with Tampa Bay. He hasn't played a game yet. And the longer they get into this thing here, the more concerning it's got to be for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Number 91 would even play in the playoffs.
Now, speaking of Stamkos, can the Lightning beat the Bruins in this series without him?
I don't think they can. I took the Boston Bruins to win the series. I think it'll be a 7-game series, just like the Flyers and the Islanders are going to be a 7-game series as well. So I like Boston. I just think that there's too much there, too much depth right now. I like what Tampa Bay did to go out and get Patrick Maroon last summer. They gave up a lot, a first-round pick for Blake Coleman, a first-round pick for Barclay Goodrow. Julian Brisebois has given up a lot to get these types of players in there. They had a veteran Hard Rock defenseman in Zach Bogosian as well. So Tampa Bay is a different team. They look like a different team. That's, I think, one of the reasons why they were able to beat their nemesis, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the team that swept them away last spring. They're a lot heavier, a lot more physical. I just think Boston's got every component that you need to win at this time of the season, let alone the experience with 6 30-somethings on the team and guys that have won a Stanley Cup along the way. So I like Boston. In the end, I would have liked them a lot better had Tuukka Rask stuck around, but I still think they can win with Yaroslav Halak and his experience. I like the Bruins to win in 7.
So you got Flyers and Bruins both winning in 7. So we're talking about really going deep there. And the reason I bring that up is because also we were surprised here of how many back-to-backs are already scheduled for these series. So you and the Flyers, they got Wednesday, Thursday, and then the Flyers, their game 6 and 7 week back-to-backs too. How could those back-to-backs impact these series as well?
That's a great question. And yeah, the Flyers-Bruins, I think about it, Josh, that would be a rematch of the 74 Stanley Cup final, which might see Philadelphia just fine the way things turned out. But look, the back-to-backs are interesting. It's pretty clear the NHL has said, you know what, we're not going to wait. We're not going to wait 3 or 4 days between series. I mean, when teams are ready to go, teams are ready to go. As we saw, they kind of fast-forwarded Colorado and Dallas to us on Saturday night when initially we thought we'd have a night off. They just want to get this done, and now they've talked about the fact that, you know, they were going to end the season and hand up the Stanley Cup in the first week of October. Now it feels like at the pace that they're at and the rate that they're on, it looks like it's going to be late September when they hand the Stanley Cup out. So they're not wasting any time. As far as each team and how they deal with the back-to-backs, look, that's why you've got the Black Aces. That's why you've got guys who skate hard. after practice that try to stay ready, whether it's injury or just fatigue or a combination of the two, whether it's having to go to a backup goaltender. If you've got a two-headed monster in goal, do you want to go to the two-headed monster and go to the backup guy in a situation? Do you trust him enough to do so? Some teams probably would. Some teams probably wouldn't. I just think, the back-to-backs present an amazing dynamic here. You don't have to certainly factor in too much in the way of travel. Nobody's got to go anywhere. They're in a bubble. So that perhaps, bodes well for teams that are wanting to have a little bit more energy and juice. But it is something to think about. Each series has had a back-to-back or so, and, it's something to be contended with, that's for sure.
Scott, before I let you go, I want to ask you, you just mentioned the goaltenders. Do the Flyers have the best backup goaltender situation of all the Eastern Conference teams left?
Well, they're certainly better than Boston right now. Daniel Vladar had an excellent season with Providence, and he got that extension yesterday, but he's more or less, untested at this point. I look at the situation with Curtis McElhinney with Tampa Bay. He's been a real good veteran backup along the way, but I think that he, too, is a little bit longer in the tooth at this point. So I think it's down to Philadelphia and the New York Islanders. I mean, Thomas Greiss is a really good goaltender. He's an unrestricted free agent to be here coming up. He'll find a job probably as a backup somewhere else again next season. But I think the German international, Thomas Greiss, is probably right there with the Moose, Brian Elliott, maybe even slightly ahead of him. That being said, I'd probably take Carter Hart just slightly ahead of Semyon Varlamov. So I guess what I'm saying is when you add it all up at the end of the day, Josh, I would say that the goaltending is pretty much a wash when you go 1-2 and 1-2, Islanders versus the Flyers.
Well, when you describe it like that, it really sounds like we are going 7 games. He's Scott Laughlin. Follow him on Twitter, Laughlin SXM, SiriusXM NHL Radio, co-host of the NHL Morning Skate. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Scott, always appreciate the insights and enjoy the hockey.
All right, enjoy the series, guys.